Griffin III has found a home. He will be, by the end of the day, a member of the Cleveland Browns. The number 2 overall selection in 2012 by the Washington Redskins, the 2012 Rookie of the Year, is set to sign a free agent deal today in Cleveland. How about that? As we just watched the Carson Wentz Pro Day, many people think the Browns, with Hugh Jackson there, could be selecting Carson Wentz number 2 overall. They have another quarterback in the building, about to be in the building. Albert Breer has this news for us. He joins us live on the phone now on a special path to the draft. They had him in there last week. Hugh Jackson, obviously, Albert liked something he saw.
Yeah, and I think the main question here for the Browns is going to be whether or not Hugh and Griffin could mesh. Because Hugh's known for coaching guys really hard. He's tough on guys. He's unrelenting, and he's especially that way with quarterbacks. And so, obviously, Griffin kind of scuffled under that sort of environment with the Shanahans in Washington. There's some question about whether he'd be able to handle it. And that's why the meeting last weekend was so key, was getting Hugh in front of him and seeing that, Robert Griffin III was humbled, that going through what he went through and failure for the first time really as a football player, period, had changed him to some degree, and he was ready to take coaching in that manner. And so, this is kind of, I think, the way you want to look at it, Andrew. If finding a quarterback, if they got that dartboard up, this is throwing another dart at that dartboard.
But, Albert, we don't think in any way whatsoever that this would, after we watch the Carson Wentz Pro Day, prevent the Browns from still going quarterback at 2.
No, and you know what, Andrew, I think what's interesting about it, we talk a lot about Griffin, and I think Kaepernick fits into this category too. Those guys haven't been good quarterbacks the last couple of years, so, I think it's a worthy reclamation project, but I don't think either of those guys were at the point coming into this offseason where anybody was going to look at them as a long-term answer. So if you're sold that Carson Wentz or Jared Goff is going to be the long-term answer for you until you pull the trigger on him and you throw him in there and you have him compete with Griffin.
Now, there's so many fascinating storylines. You go back to the 2012 draft, remember the Redskins traded the big bounty to the Rams. St. Louis at the time was picking number 2. Washington moved up. The Browns were at 4. They moved up to 3, right behind the Redskins' RG3 pick, and they took Trent Richardson. He was immediately moved out then a year later. You could have Albert thinking ahead, if Josh Gordon is reinstated this year, that could make for an interesting pairing. RG3 and Josh Gordon back together again, Baylor teammates.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they obviously have the relationship there. And, I think one of the big things with all of these guys, obviously Griffin and Gordon have different issues. And, Gordon's still got to jump some of those hoops as far as the league goes. When a first-year coach comes in, it's important for him to kind of set his culture, and there's a weeding out process there. So, both of these guys are going to get really hard coaching, like I said, and it's up to them whether or not they're going to be weeded out, as Hugh kind of goes through all of that. But it's certainly intriguing when you think about the idea of, Josh Gordon, what he can do downfield, and what Robert Griffin brings to the table from an arm strength standpoint. And I think one thing that was important for Griffin going through this whole process is getting around the right coaches. And there are very few guys who are as adept at coaching in a quarterback position as Hugh Jackson. He worked with Joe Flacco as a rookie in Baltimore. He's obviously got the experience working with Andy Dalton the last couple of years there in Cincinnati. And so it looks, at least on paper, like Robert Griffin went to a good place for a quarterback to learn. Now it's up to him to be able to react to the coach, and the coach's style in particular, the way Hugh Jackson's going to do it there in Cleveland.
All right. This one's going to be fascinating. Thank you, Albert Breer, with the breaking news here that RG3, by the end of the day, will be a member of the Cleveland Browns. Thank you there. RG3, how about that, guys? Number 2 overall selection in 2012. Now, there are still some things, I think, for me, some questions up in the air. Number 1, I'd love to look at this contract and see what kind of guarantees are in this
the length of the contract.
And the length of the contract as well, Daniel Jeremiah. Josh McCown is still under contract. Many think now that if you bring in RG3, maybe Josh McCown becomes a very attractive trade piece, although you have to question what any team would give up for a veteran quarterback deep into his 30s. If Josh McCown were cut free today, I guarantee you Denver Maybe even the Jets, as they're at a stalemate with Ryan Fitzpatrick, potentially. The Rams here in Los Angeles as well, but they certainly
All of a sudden, it sounds good to be Josh McCown.
It is good to be Josh McCown, but let's focus, if we could, on RG3. Again, if there are no guarantees in this contract, he has to make the team first.
No question. I mean, I have so many questions with this whole thing right now. It's fascinating to look at, but I was sitting here and just writing some notes down. So he goes to play for Hugh Jackson. I was thinking, okay, well, Hugh came from Cincinnati, where he replaced who? Jay Gruden. So you have to assume they have a good relationship. So I would assume that Jay, even as messy as that got there with RG3, would have had to have given him a recommendation that, okay, you can work with him here and be successful. And the other one was, I have the image in my mind of Haloti Ngata hitting RG3 and really kind of change his career from that point forward after he hurt his knee on that one. And now RG3 with the durability question, you're in a division with Baltimore, Pittsburgh, and Cincinnati. That's why I don't know. I mean, you can't be relying on him solely as your guy going forward. I think if they like one of these quarterbacks at 2, they go ahead and take him.
Guys, the Browns have made it official. They have just tweeted out their press release headline: Browns signed quarterback Robert Griffin III. The first sentence: Robert Griffin III was sold on Cleveland as soon as his meeting with Browns head coach Hugh Jackson and associate head coach Pep Hamilton was complete. There's a quote here from RG3, quote, "I'm excited about the opportunity to join the Dog Pound and help build something here in Cleveland." Robert Griffin III is a Brown.
Go all the way back, because Robert Griffin III was also recruited heavily coming out of high school by Stanford. Pep Hamilton used to coach where? At Stanford.
Yep.
Understands how to talk to him, knew him from a young man. With Hugh Jackson, you're talking about an ultra-confident coach, a guy who has a proven track record of dealing with quarterbacks. We will talk about him coaching guys hard, but as much as he coaches them hard, he also loves his guys up. And so they have a way of responding and playing for them. In terms of the Jay Gruden connection, I think we all will say that we saw Andy Dalton and even A.J. McCarron, their game go to another level with Hugh Jackson in place. Maybe Hugh Jackson sees a reclamation project, a guy that was the #2 pick overall. Those guys get multiple chances to show that they can or cannot get it done in the league. Maybe the Browns are hoping that they can hit it on the downside.
And here's a quote about that second chance, Bucky, and this is again from the Browns press release. "I cherish the opportunity," RG3 says, "to get another chance to play this beautiful game." He doesn't mean soccer, he means our football, the National Football League. And I think a lot of people are going to question what kind of RG3 mentally in terms of his preparation. No one's questioned his work ethic, but there are other issues perhaps inside that locker room, and you have to question what is he like in his second chance, his second act, if you will. And that second act is going to be in Cleveland. We just saw the Browns coaching staff on the field in Fargo, North Dakota, working out Carson Wentz. Our Mike Mayock was there. We all agree Carson Wentz looked good. This, Mike, we don't think changes the Browns' draft perspective at 2, but it certainly is interesting, isn't it?
Andrew, you can never have enough quarterbacks, and you've got to believe in the competition mantra. Think of Seattle a few years ago before Russell Wilson. Remember, didn't they trade for Matt Flynn?
Yes.
Gave him a big contract the year before.
Yeah.
The year before they drafted Russell Wilson. Pete Carroll and John Schneider just kept drafting quarterbacks, looking for a fit. So the way I look at this is it changes nothing. It gets another competent quarterback onto your roster. You've got McCown as the savvy mentor for both of these guys. And if you believe there's a franchise quarterback at #2, when you're on the clock, you better draft him. So from my perspective, if it's Carson Wentz, draft him. Let him compete with the other 2 guys, and let's see what happens.
Mike, the RG3 that you've seen the last couple of years, how far away is he from getting back to the guy we saw in 2012? Jay Gruden says he wants to see him develop as a pocket passer. That never really happened.
Andrew, the reality is, if you want to change your entire offense to incorporate the zone read and all the movement stuff, half-field reads and all that, he could play very quickly. But then you'd be exposing him to injury again, the same thing that caused the initial downfall. If you want him to be a pocket NFL quarterback, I watched a bunch of his tape 2 years ago. He's still a long way from feeling comfortable in a pocket. So when he goes to Cleveland, I think Hugh Jackson is such a good quarterback guy, he'll find ways to help him get more comfortable. But I would tell you right now, Wentz and Goff are both much more comfortable in the pocket than RG3 is.
Mike, what do you think his future is? RG3, we know he's a member of the Cleveland Browns. You see him being a legitimate starter again, though?
I was at their game in December in Philadelphia. I went down on the field before the game and I watched the quarterbacks throw the football. And he stayed on the field and threw for an extra 20 minutes after the team went back in. He's got a big arm. He's got wow kind of athletic ability, as we all know. But at the end of the day, this young man's got to decide whether he's going to buy in and try to become a true NFL quarterback or not. So to answer your question, I think it really goes more to his commitment mentally and with all the intangibles. Will he commit fully to an NFL style of play and every waking minute practice that? And I think therein somewhere lies your answer.
And the situation in Cleveland ahead of the draft gets that much more intriguing, holding that number 2 overall pick. Thank you, Mike Mayock, there in Fargo with the breaking news that RG3 is a member of the Browns. They're not trading number 2 pick now, are they? No, they're keeping it, right? I don't know, it's just something to think about as we continue on the path to the draft.
I'll answer that question later.